If you enjoy the story, give it a like and feel free to leave a comment. Also, be sure to subscribe and click the bell icon to be the first to hear new cryptid tales. I'm always looking for stories to share, so if you've had your own encounter with the unknown, send me an email at cryptidtalesmel@gmail.com. The following months after that first encounter, every time my cousin and I went out, strange things would happen. Another occurrence we had was just a few months later. We had been taking a walk on an old logging road, just trying to explore and maybe see a bear. We began walking, and we were enjoying how nice and quiet it was. About 200 yards into the woods, we heard a loud whistle-like sound, something we had never heard before. A wolf or coyote or any bird doesn't make a sound like what we heard. We just kept on walking, still enjoying our day, and again we heard it, deep into the woods. I had my rifle, so I fired a shot into the air, and the sound stopped. We kept walking for about another 5 minutes, and then we heard it again, closer to us this time, so I fired off another shot, and again it stopped. We started walking, and again, after a while, we heard the strange whistle-like sound. This time I fired into the woods. You could hear it crashing as it moved deep into the woods, and every so often it would whistle. We sat and listened till it was gone. After that, we decided to just head home. The entire trip back was quiet. No more whistles. Another time, we had gone to a lake people from Nonwallet call the Third Lake, because there's 3 lakes nearby, and that particular one is the third one. We had gone there to do some fishing and have a little picnic. We had caught a few fish and were having a good time. We built a small fire and had some hot dogs. By the time we were finished, it was getting pretty late. We were sitting quietly, and from about halfway down the lake, we heard a blood-curdling scream. My cousin looked at me with huge eyes and asked, "What was that?" I knew it was something strange, but I told him it was just a loon, before saying we should just go ahead and head home. We put our fire out and packed up. We had began our drive home, but the whole way something had just felt strange. About 5 minutes on the trail to the left, I had seen something that still makes my hair stand up and gives me goosebumps. In a group of alders, I had seen a set of eyes and a head covered in reddish-brown fur. I flicked the headlights on and off on the four-wheeler, checking to see if it was maybe the leaves reflecting, but it was nothing like that. We were almost home, and the whole time we hadn't said a word to each other. My cousin broke the silence and said, "I need to tell you something. Back there, I saw something in the alders." I started shaking. I knew exactly what he saw as I listened to him describe seeing the same thing I had. I believe something is connected to us because ever since we were 9 and 10 years old, we have witnessed strange things. It's really strange to me because I don't know why this is. Another time I had gone hunting and all of my cousins were busy or sick, so I had gone alone. It was September and moose hunting season was coming to a close. I headed up to the third lake to go look for a moose. Admittedly, it was much later than I should have gone out. It was already about 6 p.m. when I left. It was getting dark outside, and the fog was extremely low. I saw ducks flying, and they'd just fly up and disappear into the thick fog. I walked around trying to look for signs of moose in the area. I hadn't seen anything, and it was dead quiet. There was no noise at all. An hour went by, and there was barely any light left. Across the river from me, I heard what sounded like a black bear cub crying and screaming. That kind of freaked me out, so I ran back to my four-wheeler and loaded up all my gear and started driving home. Behind me, I could hear the water splashing like crazy. I sped up. Then, something started thrashing in the berry bushes behind me. I had gotten back to the main trail finally, and I was terrified. I was going about 25 miles per hour on my four-wheeler, and to the left of me I heard the thick brush just crashing. The branches were breaking, and I could hear the loud snaps over the motor of my four-wheeler. I sped up some more, and whatever it was keeping up with me. I had finally gotten near the Y in the road, where one trail goes down the logging road, and the one I was on meets the trail back to Nonwalek. I stopped briefly and looked up the hill towards the logging road. I shined my headlights at the top, and what I saw scared me to death. I saw a tall figure. It was all gray, and it looked like it was covered in fur. I immediately took off very fast towards the village. Again, to my left, I could hear the brush crashing beside me, following me as I went. I finally got to the second lake, and the way you get back is by driving on the side of the lake because it's shallow. Even then, I could still hear the noises to the left of me. I had gotten about halfway, and suddenly the strangest thing happened. My four-wheeler just died, like completely turned off. I was turning the key back and forth, and it was not turning back on. I heard the noises getting closer and closer, and then when they were right above me, the noises stopped. I was thinking, this is it. This is the way I'm going to die. I closed my eyes and said a quick prayer before pulling out my rifle. I shot straight into the woods. Boom, boom, boom. And on the fourth shot, boom. My headlights came back on. My entire body was trembling. I hit the ignition and took off as soon as the engine kicked on. When I got home, I just laid there, shaking, in shock for what seemed like hours. One of my cousins came to my house later that night, and I could barely talk, but I told him what had happened. I could tell it scared him just hearing about it. 2 weeks later, people had been walking to Nonwalek from the neighboring village, and they claimed they heard what they described as a baby bear crying in the trees behind them. As I'm typing this right now, I'm shaking just at the memory of it. It is very hard to talk about. I believe the things in the woods are in some way connected to Alaskan natives and Native Americans, because every culture has their own story of the same thing, and in my village, it is something everyone talks about. It's a huge part of our culture, and there's been hundreds, if not thousands, of stories of people seeing or hearing similar things. I hope you enjoy my stories and it helps. Thank you very much for allowing me to share it. The story that I had to tell you happened to a family friend that is still currently in the Marines. His name is Juan, and this happened in New Mexico. He had come home to visit his family and had stopped by my mom's house to say hi and to see how we were doing. Anyways, my mom was talking to him and asked him what's the craziest thing during training that he had seen. He said that the craziest thing he had ever seen didn't happen in training, but when he was at home. He told us that him and a couple of his friends were going home from a night out on the town, and his friend said, "Look at that fire on top of the hillside." For some reason, they decided to go check it out. As they made their way to where the fire was, they saw that it was a large bonfire and that there were 3 Native American men dancing around the fire. One of his friends shouted and asked what they were doing. One punched him in the arm to shut him up, but all 3 of the native men stopped dancing and looked down the hill towards them. One said that one of the men took off running the opposite way as the other 2 ran down the hillside toward them. He watched in disbelief as the two native men turned into wolves as they ran down the hill towards them. He said he knows that doesn't sound right, but it's the God's honest truth, and he swore it on his own mother. He said that they ran back to the car and they couldn't get out of there fast enough. When they got to the house, they ran inside and locked all the doors and windows and closed all the curtains they had. They were so afraid to even look outside that they called the neighbor and asked them to take a look from their place and let them know if they saw anyone lurking around. Confused, the neighbor agreed and looked out the window facing their house. The neighbor told them no, they didn't see anyone outside. Then they hesitated and said, "Wait, I do see 3 large dogs out there walking around in the yard." My mom interrupted the story and asked, "What did you guys do?" He said nothing. They just sat inside the whole night and didn't come out until the following morning. I asked him if they tried to get in the house. One told us that they listened to the sounds of scratching at the door and howling for what seemed like the entire night, and that it was the scariest night of his entire life. He said that he never wants to go through that again, and that he hasn't told anyone else about this story.